An aspect of Xeno discussion and analysis that historically has only really extended as far as Gears and Saga is the etymology behind the names of areas in the games. This is not a knock on the Blade games whatsoever. They're a different formula, they have much bigger worlds, so they need to have more names for regions, areas, and locations within them, so I'm not exactly going to get on their case for just making up cool sounding names for most areas instead of going for a specific theme with them. That being said, people did discover that like a dozen location names in Oblivia and Xenoblade X are actually named after soccer players, so there is some theming going on with some of these, and I would not be surprised if at least the other regions in X have themes that just haven't been investigated yet. But today, I want to talk about the regions of Xenoblade 3's Aionios. As though there's not a specific theme, there is a through line behind all of their names. As such, I will need to spoil Xenoblade 3, though technically not future redeemed because you just need to know the name of the area from that expansion. And for once, that's it. This might actually be the first video I've made that was only Xenoblade 3 spoilers, because when you make the kind of content I do, it's really hard to discuss anything spoiler related with 3 that doesn't also feed into the fact that it's a sequel to 1 and 2. Whereas in this case, Origin being the name of the final region is the only thing that's really an actual spoiler at all. It would also be wrong of me to continue without mentioning that most of what became the backbone of this video was researched by the late Kari Hana several years ago before her passing. I think I've mentioned this before, but a lot of conversations we had about Xeno stuff ended up becoming videos on this channel purely because we ended up figuring something out that I hadn't seen anyone talk about on the internet before. And every time I check our DM history to try and figure out exactly which videos those were, because I do eventually want to make a playlist only of those, I keep finding more and more things that weren't even made into a video at all, or things that would be completely redundant if made into a video in the present day, because in between then and now, they just ended up being proven true by a new game that came out. In this case, I tweeted mostly as a joke and not intending to go anywhere with it, something along the lines of, haha, I figured out what Sent Omnia means pretty quickly, but I have no idea about the names of the rest of the Xenoblade 3 areas. And then like half an hour later, I got a DM being like, hey, I know some Latin. I think I could just figure these out. And then she just did. Stuff like this happened multiple times, and I don't think all of them made it into videos. There is a good chance you're going to hear something suspiciously similar to this anecdote again in the future. And in hilariously on-brand fashion, the video on the last major topic we analyzed now depends on whether or not there's going to be a Xenosaga something in between now and the next Xenoblade game, because that will entirely determine how I want to approach the structure of it. With those fond memories now shared though, I mentioned that I was able to figure out Sent Omnia's name by myself, and that Latin is important to this. And yeah, I'm not going to bury the lead any further, all of the region names are derived from something with significant meaning in Latin. And yes, all of these names must have some kind of deliberate meaning, as besides translating the word for castle in the Keves and Agnes Castle regions, the name of Sword March, and the name of the city in languages other than Japanese or English, every region name is the same across all languages the game is translated to. We might as well detour to talk about Sword March real quick. Its Japanese name is simply Taiken, which just means large sword, and that name is retained in Chinese and Korean, with both simplified and traditional Chinese just using the exact same characters, and is still partially retained in the non-Asian languages, with the location Great Sword's Hilt in Sword March itself, and Great Sword's Base in the Cadencia region, which are named Taiken no Tsuba, meaning large sword's guard, with guard being part of the hilt of a sword, and Taiken no Fumoto, Fumoto meaning either the foot of a mountain or just generally the base of something, respectively. As for Sword March, it's simply taking sword and an antiquated meaning of march, which just means frontier or borderland. It's the same march as in Marchland, and it comes from the same origin as the mark in Rittermark from Rohan in The Lord of the Rings, so if you know that, that's basically what you can imagine. And because March in that sense has a French origin, Sword March is just directly translated into French for that localization. The Italian name is just Pian di Spada, or Plain of the Sword, which is effectively a translation of Sword March as well. Spanish actually goes for a portmanteau, Fende Spada. You might be able to guess from the Italian name that Espada just means sword, and the Fende part could be several things. Either Fenda without the last letter, meaning slit or crack, or a shortened version of Defender, which just means to defend. Oh, and the German name just means great sword, so I guess maybe the German localizers went directly from Japanese instead of going through English like I'm assuming at least some of the other languages did. Just for complete rigor, and yes, I know we're delaying the Sent Omnia thing for a long time, I think it's funny, there is only one non-Latin word we need to concern ourselves with anymore, and that is the name of the country of Keves, which I don't know how, wasn't in my audio recording, so I need to record one pickup that was literally just one word, which just means sheep in Hebrew, and even then, its counterpart nation is Agnes, which means lamb in, you guessed it, Latin. And yeah, the only other non-Latin word is the Japanese word for region, which is just translated into each other language's word for region, because of course that's what you would do here. Even the castles are called Keves Castle and Agnes Castle in English in the Japanese game. And we're so Latin from here on out that even the English word castle actually comes from the Latin castellum, meaning camp or fort, which itself is derived from the word castrum, which is important because insert Gaius Van Belsar speech meme and joke about how his design is a complete ripoff of Graf from Xenogears here. This also goes for origin as well, because although it is an English word, it is ultimately derived from the Latin word origo. That sure sounds familiar, but I can't talk about that because this is a Xenoblade 3 only video. Slight addendum to what I said earlier, by the way, Origin's name is also translated in most other languages, and that's extremely funny because it's just origin in Japanese, it's whatever the Korean pronunciation of origin is in Korean, I didn't look that up. Chinese did actually change it, and then in almost all the other languages, the word for origin is just a cognate of the English origin because it was all influenced by Latin. So you have English, origin, French, origine, Spanish, origen, Italian, origine, and then there's German, which somehow dodged the Latin influence on this specific word when its fellow Germanic language English did not, because it's Ursprung, which does, mind you, still mean the exact same thing as origin. Alright, any other things I can talk about to procrastinate Cent Omnia and getting to the other major regions in Xenoblade 3? Oh, the city! I forgot the city! Well, the region that's comprised of just the city is called City, because it's the only city left in the world. So because there was not going to be any confusion, the people who created the city, and that's the first city, not even the second city, just chose to call their city, City, capitalized. And yep, it's basically the same deal, where the Japanese name is just city in English, and all the Romance languages just translate city to their word for city, which sounds very similar to city. Except, for whatever reason, German just calls the city city this time. It doesn't translate it. Don't really know why, because we're not here to discuss the minutiae of German localization. Because, yep, city also has a Latin root, civitas, there you go. Even when it's English, it's actually Latin. By the way, even though it's just used as a translation of a Japanese word, region has a Latin etymology as well. While admittedly some of the ones I've mentioned already do go through Old French before you get to Latin, a lot of words in English are not Romance languages at all. I don't know why none of the Anglo or Germanic words ended up in Xenoblade 3. They just didn't for whatever reason. Okay, Cent Omnia. You have probably figured this out yourself by now because I spent so much time yapping about everything that isn't one of the 5 main regions. Alright, the region is in the middle of Aionios. It's called Cent Omnia, and it's in the center of Aionios. The center of the world. The center of everything. Centrum Omnis. Yep, the name for the donut hole in the middle of Aionios just means the middle of everything, because it do be like that sometimes. And then we have the 4 main regions that are explored in the base game, starting off with the Etia region. You may think the whole Latin thing is going to fall off a cliff immediately because the most common thing named Etia you're going to find is an ancient Greek poem by the poet Callimachus. This poem only exists in fragments and shares its name with the etiological genre of poetry, which are concerned with the origins of things. In this case, stories and myths, some of which were considered archaic even back in the mid-200s BC when this came out, that explains the origins of things like, at the time, modern phenomena and customs. I think this is an interesting thing to name something after, and I wouldn't put it past the Xeno series to use ancient literature as the names for things. But I don't think this is what the region itself was named after, as it doesn't fit with the much clearer Latin stuff in every other name. Etia is also an obscure Roman name of the Greek name Ithra or Ithra, which is held by several different figures throughout Greek mythology. Theseus's mother has this name, as well as a water nymph, one of the Oceanids, that depending on the telling is the mother of the Pleiades or Hyades, both of whom are groups of significant nymphs who are sisters. Coincidentally, one of the other Oceanids is actually named Melia, who had children with Apollo, one of whom is one of the most important heroes of Thebes. On the Roman side, Etius was both a given and family name, though that is actually just the Latin transliteration of the Greek name Aionios, deriving from the Greek word for eagle. I also don't think that's where the name is from. However, the more recent Italian version of the name is Ezio, so that's where that comes from. But perhaps most importantly are the last two words, etiologia and aeternitas. Starting with the latter, yeah, the English word eternity does come from that word. It's just spelled with an A in front of it in Latin, so there's a bunch of different words derived from aeternitas that mean eternity, everlasting, infinity, lifetime, generation, forever, to immortalize, stuff like that. This also comes close to a Latin translation of Aionios, which is Greek for everlasting, or as Noah says in the opening monologue, eternity. I think this makes quite a lot of sense as, well, Aetia is both the first and last region of Aionios you visit during the game. You start there, and you dip a little bit back in there for the Capricorn stuff before heading into Origin. Etiologia, on the other hand, yeah, okay, it does have the same roots as etiology and the Aetia the poem, meaning the explanation of the causes and origins of things, which I think is very important as a double meaning because, well, yes, this is the point where the Ouroboros that is the shape of Aionios itself comes full circle. It is also the starting point, so it is the origin of the quest to take down Origin, while also being part of this eternal, everlasting world. Alright, time for some major whiplash, because Fornis is so simple. Like, half the Fornis region is a desert, and Fornis, spelled with a U instead of an I in Latin, just means oven or bakery. It's the origin of the word furnace. Fornax means furnace or kiln. It's really that simple. Okay, perhaps there's a bit more here. The Fornis region is where a lot of Chapter 2 and some of Chapter 3 take place, and those are the chapters where the party really comes together and begins working as a team and becoming friends with each other across nation lines. So perhaps Fornis is also the furnace through which they are forged into a proper fighting team who will take down Mobius one day. Then we have the Pentelis region, and yeah, admittedly, this is the one with the least clear name out of all of them, but I think there are a few ways to go. You could immediately see Penta and jump to something related to 5, but I don't really think that's the case, as there are several other ways to go. If you really want to go Greek, I could see the term Panthalassa, or the idea of there being one big world ocean that encompasses everything, being interpreted in katakana into something very similar to the Pentelis region's Japanese name, but I still think it's Latin. Penetrale in Latin could mean the innermost part of a place, usually a shrine or something dedicated to the gods, which does feel like something that fits the vibes of an area including the enclosed Great Kate Falls, Mactho Wildwood, which is basically a relic of an age so far long past that not even the people before Aionios know about it, and the Orion Tunnels, when the Orion Titan, both living and dead, has been a very important piece of iconography for both Xenoblade 2 and 3. And then there's the fact that Penna means feather or wing. I've honestly always thought it was weird that Keves Castle gets an entire region around itself, while Agnes Castle is just Agnes Castle and the area outside is part of Cadencia, so I'm thinking there might have been some technical limitations behind it. And the Sierra hovering reefs were indeed supposed to be part of Pentelis, with there being a loading screen on the way into Keves Castle instead of into its surroundings. If that's the case, then Pentelis having to do with wings makes a whole lot of sense, because that's where the Amelia Castle is. Penatulis means provided with wings or winged, and Nitella means brightness, or something that causes something to shine. So if you take Pentelis by combining feather or wing with brightness or shine, yeah, there's a good chance the name of the region itself was supposed to mean brilliant wings. I do like the idea of provided with wings, though, as this is the region where Taion sees a lot of his character development, and where he begins to grow as a character and unlock his Ouroboros form. Yeah, the other two Agnians get it too, but I never liked that being in the same cutscene anyway. But while Taion and his Ouroboros don't have wings, he is combined with Uni, a Hyantia. The Mondo have wings, and there's a lot of flying and all that in that scene as well. So I think the idea is that if Aetia is the origin of everything, Fornis is where the party is forged together, Pentelis is where they're given the wings to soar ever higher, reaching the city, reaching each other, reaching out to people like Isard and Yorin, and eventually reaching the center of Origin itself. They're given wings, but they're not going to fly too close to the sun because they're going to succeed. Then lastly, we have the Cadencia region, and this one's a little bit simpler, but there's still a bit to look into here. Before learning anything about the etymology, Cadencia always struck me as a good name for a water region, and I could never place why. But I think it's mostly because it begins with C-A-D-E, the ending of cascade, and yup, part of the etymology of cascade is the Latin word cadere, meaning to fall, sink, drop, plummet, to die, to end, or to decay. Given that Cadencia is by far the largest region in the game, that means it's been the most chewed up by the annihilation events causing Aionios to slowly decay. It's also the last region visited in the game besides Origin itself, so there's the ending to go with Etia potentially deriving from beginning or origin. It's also, well, the water region in Aionios, so most of the outside of Cadencia is just a bunch of waterfalls or cascades. And since the Agnes Castle region is just Agnes Castle, being accessible only through Cadencia, I think it's safe to say that, well yes, you go into a different loading zone called the Agnes Castle region, the events of Chapter 5 take place in Cadencia. This is where Mio and the entire quest to stop Mobius seemingly dies, but is then reborn. And also, not only do you start at Etia, the region of origin, you get forged through the fires of Fornis, the furnace. Then you gain wings through Pentelis. You fall down potentially after soaring as high as you thought you could by ascending the Great Sword and visiting the city. Then you reach Cadencia and you have a fall where everything almost ends, and you sink almost as low as the water slewing off the sides of the world in those cascades, before returning to Etia, discovering more about your origins, and about Origin itself, and then going to Origin to finish Mobius, putting an end to their infinite loop, and finally dismantling the world of eternity. The entire quest is an Ouroboros through naming as well, and I think that is extremely neat. It's given me even more appreciation of Xenoblade 3. I might need to replay this just exclusively in handheld on the Switch too, given how gorgeous it looks now with the boost feature. And yeah, wow, the Xeno series is a gift that keeps on giving. I don't really know what to say. Not every name in the series is as well thought out as this. I tried to look up some theme at least for the names of specific locations, and, well, a lot of the things in Fornis, which is where I tried to experiment with, are just random names of things. I found Wikipedia articles for a bunch of stuff. There were like French philosophers, I think there was a soccer player again, Brazilian poet, I think, and then a few that are just corruptions or slight twists of names of real world things. So yeah, I have a feeling someone just hit the random button on Wikipedia a bunch of times and found names that sounded cool and used them for that. But in the things where the names are important and actually could matter to the themes and overall story, they do stuff like this all the time, and I always think it's cool. Until next time, when I'll probably be exploring something completely different from this is Luxon, signing off.